Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Coach's Corner. Today's topic is going to be what is mental stack. We're also going to be going over how to improve your mental stack and other ways you can kind of like cheat mental stacking with option selects and other little tricks like that other top players do. And also mental stacking in the context in tournament. Obviously, in a tournament environment, nerves are a bit higher, so mental stacking will be a little different in tournament in terms of just like your ability or how well you can mental stack. So the things like option selects and stuff like that are going to be really strong in tournament when you're not really playing at your best, right? No one's really playing at their best in tournament. So yeah, let's get right into it. I think mental stacking, a lot of it's a term you hear a lot in especially the FGC for traditional fighting games, and it's really the way I like to explain it. I like to personally explain it as refresh rate. So that's something that happens more so in neutral. I guess refresh rate can apply anywhere in the game, right? And same with mental stacking. So you are looking out for multiple options and you're trying to cover multiple options on reaction. That's generally how I like to explain mental stacking. So for example, when you're ledge trapping, if you are focused and you're shielding right by ledge, you're going to grab normal get up. You can, depending on your character, you can do like a rising back air to cover roll, right? Or if you understand the timing that your opponent is going to go for a ledge option, you can drop shield as they pick their ledge option and go for the parry on the get up attack. And then as you're dropping shield, if they're rolling as you're dropping shield, you can get a run up smash and stuff like that. If you see a jump, you can try to react to the jump with the rising up air or a full hop aerial, right, to stuff out their jump, but it kind of depends on like what option they do after the jump. They could go for an air dodge or they could swing, stuff like that. So and then obviously again, normal get up, you'll grab it, or if you're feeling really confident, you can go for a smash attack, right? I know if you like with Fox, for example, if you start seeing an animation, you can guess and forward smash, but as the normal get up animation is completing, you can't decipher if it's normal get up or get up attack. There are some characters that have visual cues that you can, but understanding like, okay, if I'm just reacting to normal get up, grab is easy, nair is easy, right? Depending on how tall the character is. But if you start reacting to like as the person starts coming off the ledge and you go for something like forward smash and you understand the timing so your forward smash connects with the normal get up, you're more so guessing at that point, but you're guessing for the kill, right? So mental stacking, there's a bunch of different ways that you can just react, right? And then during the mental stack, you can kind of hedge your bets and go for bigger reads. And that's my, I guess, explanation of mental stacking. Obviously, this topic's really deep and there's a bunch of other viewpoints as well. And there's a bunch of other examples. I think tech chasing is another really easy one, right? I think the hardest time to mental stack is during neutral because that's when the array of options are the largest. In a tech chase scenario, your opponent really only has 4 options. So the mental stack, the actual stack is 4, right? That you're trying to react to. But in neutral, the stack can be infinite or a lot more than 4. So yeah, that's my explanation. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Bam, especially with your you have so much previous experience with competing in traditional fighters and stuff like that. And I think that's where I first heard the term coming from the FGC. And obviously the FGC has been around a lot longer than competitive Smash. So love to hear your thoughts on your explanation on mental stack.
Yeah, no, for sure. Mental psych is interesting, right? Because I know we're talking about, fighting games and obviously in platform fighters, right? Like it's Smash, but the really interesting thing about mental stack is that's something that like transcends that as well, right? Outside of gaming and fighting. Just the other day there was I forgot who it was. It might have been Chris Okarama. Might have been him, but some guy who actually heads a lot of the content side on Evo, right? And he was actually showcasing like, oh, sick. There's a GSPs actually showcasing mental stacking, right? And like how to like add mental stack against somebody, right? By using a combination of feints and things like that, right? So like this is something that you see in competition, period, right? And it's part of the underlining premise of trying to mask intentions as well. How do you use that to your advantage? A lot more often is, it has some tie in with the idea of mental stack, right? Whether you're trying to add to an opponent's mental stack, where or how are you trying to set up things, how you can reduce your own mental stack so you can be in a more favorable position, right? Um, Obviously, one of the big things that come to mind, I think, in terms on the tech side is like option selects, right? So option selects, of course, doing a series of inputs, and based on the next situation at hand, right? The game essentially chooses based on what the interaction happens, and the idea is to put a selection of inputs that essentially are going to be favorable for you, right? Um, for like perfect example, right? You have in like you have throw tech OSs and stuff like that in fighting games, right? And when you're talking about in Smash, particularly like Ultimate, there's a lot of option selects that essentially appear because of the parry and being able to jump out of that, right? And so it's a situation where it's like, oh, if I just have the input and just jump, it's going to prioritize the jump. I'm just going to jump out, cool. But if the parry happens in that moment, then that extra input, the other additional inputs that I put in, whether it's an aerial, of course, some characters use their specials as well, and those will come out for you. And that's something you don't have to think about, right? So now, when going back to what you were talking about in terms of the options, right, the mental stack, now you're able to consolidate that. And when you're able to consolidate that, now you're in a position where it's going to be easier for you to, like, you essentially you're taking a multiple choice instead of doing A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever. Now I got A and B. Sick, right? And that's the way that you want to deal with that, like when you are looking at your own mental stack, right? But yeah, it's something that is really at like the center, like the crux of like fighting games and competition, because a lot of times that's the thing you're trying to look for, right? You're gonna have intelligent people competing against each other, right? Ideally. And one of the biggest things is like, okay, how do I mix up, or how do I get them to pick the wrong option? And a lot of that is by either A, presenting a lot of options, which will start lifting their mental stack, right? Or like, how do I reduce it so I can put myself in a position where I only got two things to work through, right? And two is going to be a lot easier than 10, 20, 30, 40, right? But yeah, I always love this discussion on this, because the tech side, the mental side too, right? Being able as a person to reduce these things is so pivotal in also like long term, like again, when you're going through a tournament, how can I last longer, right? How can I like mental dexterity due to being able to understand how I can navigate through mental stacks, right? And going up against someone who's really talented, who's gonna like, okay, their mental stack, they're used to handling 10 options, and I can only handle 4 or 5. Like, how do I change that, right? So being able to identify that in your opponent, being able to elevate that and decrease that in yourself are some of the biggest things in fighting games. But yeah, I think it's obviously a really great topic to discuss. So yeah, Ramsey, I would love to hear on your side, man, like just about, as you as a coach, right, coming through. I'm sure like this is a conversation that's happened numerous times, right, through a host of people. And yeah, I'd just love to hear how you kind of navigate that with a lot of your students, both on the lower level and on the higher level.
Yeah, for sure. I think you guys mentioned a lot in regards of, I think, what you need to know to kind of get started with mental stack. And I think the reason why most people struggle to get started with mental stack is because low key in current ultimate meta, for 99% of players, it's not going to be relevant in any way, shape, or form. And so the way I think about mental stack is that it's essentially, how many choices are you ready for, right? And so if you're managing your mental stack, you're making sure that you're ready for all the choices that are relevant to the current situation. And if you're mismanaging your mental stack, that either means that the opponent introduces choices that you're not ready for because, like, you judged poorly, so you thought this wasn't important, turns out it is, or because it's simply a bit of an RPS in terms of what the important choice is. And so, as you can imagine, like, just from describing that kind of dynamic, that doesn't sound very applicable to most situations, right? So, like, most of the time, for most people, if you win or lose, is more so because your game plan sucks, or because your combos are unoptimized, or because you're not really playing around stage control, or because you're right. So, like, these are all like more so just game plan related issues, more so issues related to knowing the matchup, no understanding essentially what you should be playing around in the first place. And so when we think about mental stack, it's more like, okay, when you're at a point where your game plan is really well developed. And so let's say our game plan has 100 different branches, right? Which is actually pretty tame. But let's say we have 100 different branches. Well, you cannot be ready for every single branch at all times. And so that's where the mental stack comes in. And so the mental stack says, hey, we're going to be ready for these 10 branches because we think that these are the most important. And so when our opponent shows us, hey, actually, I'm going to pursue these other like 10 branches that you're not considering, then you're getting mental stacks because you're ready for choices that the opponent is not making, essentially. And so that is where mental stack goes wrong, is when you're preparing yourself for choices that the opponent is not even considering. And so vice versa, if you're trying to catch your opponent on mental stack, oftentimes what you want to do is you want to introduce choices that they are not making. And so a lot of your mental stack is related to understanding so much about the matchup that you know what you are not paying attention to, if that makes sense. But you also know what the opponent is not paying attention to through knowing what they are paying attention to, right? Because one implies the other. If you're paying attention to something, you can only pay attention to so many things, and so there's a limit there, and that is what essentially mental stacking means, is that you're beating someone because you're doing something that they're not focusing on. And so most of the time, again, in Ultimate's current meta game, you don't need that. I think you can get to like top. Ooh, I'll do a generous estimate. You can get to top 50 in the world without ever considering mental stack. I sincerely think that. I sincerely think that the game plan of most players until you get into like top 20, top 25 territory is exploitable enough that you can do well and get close to that level just by having a better game plan than they do, rather than punishing them for their mental stack. And so I think mental stack is a very, very, very important thing to talk about, but it's something that really, really doesn't come up a lot. I have had mental stack conversations with essentially all of the top level players that I've coached. But you got to keep in mind those are the minority in my coaching. But yeah, I have the conversation, and so we talk about, for example, like, okay, when is mental stack the core issue of our mistakes, and also how are we managing our mental stack, and can we optimize the way we manage our mental stack? And so that is, I think, kind of like the final layer of any dynamic in Smash, is that there's always like the dynamic at hand, and then there's the way you manage the dynamic at hand, right? So that, like, for example, you can say, okay, there's grab, throw, and strike, and then like, how do we make decisions between grab, throw, and strike? But then there's also, how do you manage that management? So when do I consider grab, throw, strike in pattern A, and when do I consider it in pattern B, right? So sometimes you'll be playing more around avoiding the grab, and like there's a certain value system there, and sometimes you have to change that value system. And so the same goes for mental stack a lot of times, right? So when you're managing your mental stack, there are multiple ways that you can manage your mental stack. And so understanding when a specific style of management is most correct, I think that really is, at least in my experience, kind of like the final form of mental stack in the current Ultimate meta. And so TLDR, that's kind of like what I think about mental stack. It's a lot of polish, right? It's stuff that comes up really late in the development of the meta of your character, and that's also why we see it more in fighting games. First of all, more developed meta. Second of all, generally the options are more limited in fighting games. You have a system that is more closed, and because of that, you more quickly end up playing mind games, because there's way less game plan to optimize because there are less unique situations. Whereas in Smash, because there are so many unique situations, it just takes such a long time before you actually get to the point where you're optimizing all of the RPS behind the situations. And so I think that's
wait. I have a question for you, Ramses. So
go ahead.
Do you think mental stacking is not as important below like top 20 is because ultimate rewards proactive gameplay too much? Would you say it's because of how strong proactive gameplay is, you don't really have to put yourself in mental stacks until you get to that top 20 level because of how rewarding proactive gameplay is?
So
AKA
I think
game
that's
plan,
adjacent.
right?
Yeah, I think that's adjacent. So game plan. So in other words, I think as soon as you have to deal with managing your own mental stack, you're already at a deficit. And so most of the time, you can beat someone without ever having to deal with your own mental stack, and that is improving your game plan. So in a way, yes, it is. It is because initiative is so strong. But I think if I were to sum it up as like a one core issue, I would say the main reason why is because there are so many unique situations that you can create in Ultimate that before you ever think about mental stack, you're busy optimizing your game plan. And when we're talking about optimized game plan, only like maybe max 50 people in the world have a somewhat optimized game plan. And so for most people, you're better off just optimizing your game plan rather than even thinking about the mental stack that occurs within that game plan.
Yeah, I want to pass it over to Tony real quick too, but like I'm really happy that you say that as well, right? That in terms of the sheer options, right? Because I do really think that is the key, right? And there's no coincidence that you see more games that are more solved or more simplified in that way, right? You immediately go into that game, that strategy aspect of the mental stack and everything as well, right? That's why you tend to see that stuff more so in, say, like a Street Fighter or whatever, right? And then it's like when you don't see those things, it's usually because there's more things introduced. Like for, again, kind of going to Street Fighter 6 for the, I'm sure some people have been playing that now, trying that out at least, but there is more options due to how Drive Rush operates and those kind of things. So how to be optimal in that way has caused it to take a bit more time than it typically would for people to get to the point where now that we understand the nuance of this and these kind of situations, now we can kind of approach it where we have the mental stack where, to Ramsey's point, a lot of times you just like people aren't even there yet. It's about, you need to know what beats what to even get to that point when you can have that game, because the mental stack is all about like, you have to be someone who's paying attention to that other person in the first place, right? If you're not aware of what that person's aware of, then like there's that conversation never happens, right? And then it's like, two, also understanding, well, what is the right option here or what is good option? Like, a feint doesn't mean anything to you if you're too slow to even see the punches or whatever it may be, right? It's not even anything, all right? That doesn't even make sense for anyone to do, let me start a ship, like, let me like move my feet slightly. And it's like, that doesn't even mean anything to me if I can't understand, that person did that because they're faking a roundhouse kick, for some example, right? Or like, that's something I need to be looking out for because my guard's like this, like that. Like you have to, it's like the old saying when they're like, okay, you have to get to a certain level, and then now we're playing the real game, right? Like now we're playing the real game. Once we have our own understanding, yes, exactly. And you kind of have to break through that first. I think a lot of times because. And I think that's also why for some like lower level players, it's interesting because, again, you get upset. This move's too strong. This move's so weak. This one's free. And like, again, you don't have a bearing of those things anyways. So it's like you kind of have to have a bearing first before you can accurately start to look at that kind of level. But anyways, like Tony, I'd love to hear on your side, right?
Can I jump in real quick? I'm gonna intro. I'm sorry, Tony, but I'm sure when we get to you, you're gonna have the best. The best monologue out of all of us, but there's something I want to build off of that I think is interesting. And so it's my understanding that when we're looking at current metagame developments, the reason why Spargo exploded on a scene and kind of like shook up Ultimate's metagame is because of the sheer speed at which he makes decisions, which I think other players come close, like a Light or a Gluttony. But Spargo really pioneered how to use that speed. And so what we saw from Spargo is that mental stack doesn't even come into play because the opponent cannot even keep up with this decision-making speed, which is exactly what Bam was pointing out. It's like, if you don't even realize that there's a choice, you cannot get mental stacked, right? And so we for the longest time, only recently are people kind of like keeping up with Spargo in that regard. And so until recently, we couldn't even play fast enough to have relevant mental stack. And before that, we didn't even have good enough game plans to get to the point of mental stack. And so there's a lot of metagame development needed before mental stack becomes like a viable kind of like critical element to a win or defeat. Because it like we've mentioned so far, it builds on essentially both players understanding what's going on. And if one player doesn't understand what's going on, you can just beat them on speed or beat them on game plan. And so it's very rare that mental stack is the most efficient way to win when you can just play faster or just have a better game plan, which are both things that are just hard skills and not really like new choices. Whereas if we're introducing mental stack, you're introducing like a whole new dimension to your own decision making. Whereas a new game plan is literally just like you're doing the same thing but more optimal, and playing faster is like you're doing the same thing but faster, right? And of course, there's way more nuance to it. But the point is that these things like are way less complex to learn than mental stacking is. Anyway, I just wanted to add that because I think what Bam said was like super on point, very sharp comments. Yeah, from here, let's finally bring it to Tony. Tony, knock it out of the park, dude.
So I'll just recontextualize what everyone else has said up to this point, and just kind of give a different perspective on it. So the idea here is that another way to look at the mental stack is to view it as a buffer system, or a perception buffering system. And so the idea here is that you see the color, you recognize the color, process it, and then depending on how you are educated, like what language you speak, you then speak the color. And so the case here is that that's going to be multiple steps that kind of get you toward your action or response to a position. And as Charles mentioned, something that's very powerful and ultimate is that you can, if you are already planning on what you're about to say, then you can say that without having to wait to see what something is. And so if all else is equal, then the one who starts speaking first before they have to respond to something is the one who's going to win. So with this in mind, what I believe we've mentioned before as part of the learning process is that you start off with kind of an intuition, a feeling about things on how you're going to play the game. As you experience the game, you kind of internalize things and then play off of these internalizations. So as an example, if you play rock, paper, scissors, it's generally understood that not just you, but also your opponent both understand the game. And so every game of classical rock, paper, scissors that you've probably played involves everything being explained to you, so that essentially you are at least competent in that system by the time that you play your first hand. And so if we introduce a slightly more complex rock, paper, scissors system, like let's say rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, for example, then all of a sudden you now have to consider the implications just by adding that slight bit of extra complexity. And so now if you play someone, it's more likely that they're going to make a mistake, even if they are explicitly reading what you're going to do, because they're still going to be caught up in their own thoughts when they make their decision. And so they won't necessarily think through the very first hand of rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. And so going back to how this affects the ultimate, to again reiterate how dynamic, how many options there are in Smash. I genuinely have never tried calculating it because the number is more than my human brain can comprehend. The idea is that it is many thousands or hundreds of thousands of possibilities within a very short span of time. And so the idea is you can't actually comprehend everything. It is not possible. What you can do is you can try and simplify it to things I have experienced, things I have seen, things that are likely to be close to what I have seen and experienced. And so if you are not specifically playing against top level players, just watching the general capability of what that character has done before by watching other top players of that character is going to give you a range of what their plausible actions are going to be, which allows you to then simplify. Usually when you hear someone say, I know this matchup well, what they are actually communicating is that they have simplified these situations down. They have narrowed it down to what the most common positions are going to be, that they have narrowed what is unfathomably complex into rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. And then from there, the actual top players, the best players in the world at playing those matchups, have then narrowed it down to rock, paper, scissors. To again piggyback off of what Ramses was saying about how far up you can go without knowing this, even when you get up into the top 10 level players, ultimately what they're doing is they're just getting into beginner levels of rock, paper, scissors, where they will frequently get into their own heads thinking, well, he knows that I threw rock last time, so he's definitely going to throw scissors this time because he knows that I'll go to paper this time.
The
And
Princess Bride, the wine in front of me.
Yeah. So they'll get in their own heads.
One of the best scenes. If you play competitive games, look it up. Princess Bride, wine in front of me. It's great.
It's thought pollution is essentially what it comes down to.
That's
so
what it is.
Which is, again, going back to proactive play, one of the simplest ways to fight thought pollution is to keep it simple. And so the simpler your plan, the less likely you are to defeat yourself by overthinking positions or situations, telling yourself that some hypothetical opponent who you know would perfectly counter you is the one who's actually holding your opponent's controller. All of a sudden, you can't win because you're not actually paying attention to the cause and effects of what's in front of you. You're caught up in playing a hypothetical game of rock, paper, scissors with your ideal chess master who is now sitting in that seat.
Yes.
So,
yes.
To reiterate what Bam was saying, then from this point, you then want to ask yourself, what can I do that's going to trigger thought pollution in my opponent? And these can be very simple things. So this is where baits and feints come into play. Now, I'm not going to ever accuse top players of putting this much explicit thought into it as, oh, well, if I take this step forward, it's going to cascade my opponent's thoughts out of control. What's probably actually coming out of their mind is, I'm going to juke them and then I'm going to slap them. And that's usually the extent of it. But why that works ultimately comes down to mental stack, that mental buffer.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea is, once you recognize what your opponent recognizes, again, going back to the color example that I began with, once you realize your opponent always is going to say green when you show them a color that you recognize as green, you can just show them a red color, call it green out loud, and then see if they accidentally call it a different color than it is. And so once you do that, this is how you can investigate your opponent's mental stack. And if you can do this with things that don't necessarily commit to the board, so again, going back to that single step, it is not possible to whiff punish a character single step forward unless you were already going to do something. It's just not humanly possible. The game input delay alone is going to prevent you from doing so. So the idea there is, by throwing out these things that are essentially safe shimmies of sorts, you can then investigate your opponent's mental stack, however you perceive it, and see what you can do to affect your opponent's mental stack. And this is ultimately still within that kind of that second layer of mental stack RPS. And so I would go so far as to say that there is no realistic set currently within top level Ultimate that has even made it to that third layer of mental stack RPS. I would say that this is an area of the game that we have observed in other games and can expect to eventually observe in Ultimate, given it is given enough time to grow and mature as a game, and the players are to improve far enough that they understand each other. So don't mistake this as, oh, well, our players are dumb. It's more of, oh, our players have to master such a wide breadth of matchups and situations that they would be foolish to deep dive into just such a specific situation as, well, how do I beat Corrin's runoff fair?
Yeah.
And that's just where you spend 100 hours, just specifically Corrin's runoff fair from a platform.
Yeah.
You are better off. Go ahead, Ramses.
That's such a specific example, but we all know why, right? The Sonic's grind. The Sonic's grind.
But I want to add something to what you're saying, Tony, because I really love what you're talking about here, and also talking about, like, okay, this doesn't mean our players are necessarily like bad, right? It's also just what the game is based on, right? And what the game is focused on, and what we have in Smash, right? In terms of the plethora of like the myriad of options that we have. Like it's very interesting, because I do think that's one of the key reasons why you have top players that try to come over to Smash, and it just never works the same way as Smashers going to their game. I think there's a very specific reason for that, and it's because of these things that we're talking about right now, right? Because I think a majority of the time, a lot of these top players in other games, they don't even get to play that game yet. Like they're still stuck in the weeds before they even get to that point, right? And sometimes people are like, see, that means all smashers are just the greatest of all time. It's like, oh, it's just like what the games are part of. And like this game is more, I think a lot of times more traditional fighting games are more distilled in that way. And that's
They
why
are.
they get to that point quicker. Right. There's so much additional stuff around Smash. And that's also part of the beauty of it. Right. That it takes you time to get there. Also too, I love that you're talking about in terms of like understanding to prioritize things, right? And then how you get people to essentially like people start to overthink things, right? And the thought pollution. And I love thought pollution a lot better than overthink, because I think that euphemism is like, it sucks for a lot of people because I think people hide behind that. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, well, I was overthinking. Like, I'm like, no, that means you missed like prioritize what's going on. Like, that is not, oh, I'm such a genius that, I couldn't understand your stupidity. Like that's why I hate that term overthinking, because some people definitely love to be like, I was overthinking. You're just dumb. So like, I didn't know you were dumb. If I knew you were smart, then I would have been right. Like, no, like, right. Like when there is that is a issue, and you got to see it as such, right? Because if you don't see it as advice, right? If you just see it as a kind of backhand, like some like weird like compliment to your genius, right? Then you never get to the point to recognize why that's something that you need to tackle, right? And that's why you need to something that you need to improve. And it's funny because these are things that at the highest level of things, right? Or like even when we're going through really complex tasks in life, all of us kind of go through this mental stack, right? And it's like it's really fascinating because even right now, I've been reading a lot on like deep learning and LLMs like stuff. So like it's funny because even how neural networks, how they're built, right, with the weights and the biases for these things and how the input, it's obviously it's modeled after the human brain, and that's what's happening, right? Like how do I prioritize these things that I understand? How do I apply some kind of bias in terms of these things? Because if I just take all this information, if I'm just taking I can't take all the sheer amount of even the computer can't, right? It can't take all those amount of computations, right? You have to get it down to at least something that's manageable, right? And with the application of like, okay, I'm applying this weight here, I'm applying this bias here, and that's how you get that output out, right? And that's why there's such an interesting complexity, right, to like language, right, and that process. But it's really fascinating because sometimes we as people, again, we're not even thinking about how we do this on a like smaller scale. And a lot of times you need to get to a point where you really understand what's going on, right, in the first place to even really play that game. But that's one of the most fascinating things to me in fighting games. Like that point, right? It's such a beautiful thing, but you got to get there first, right? But yeah, I just love your point on the thought pollution and everything too. So just wanted to say that comment. But
well, yeah, I'd say that the artistry of Smash is like sand sculpting. It's very clearly an art form, very similar to, say, marble sculpting in terms of your finished product. However, the processes that go into them are going to be completely different. If you try and just go in and build the statue of David right off the bat with sand, then you're just going to end up with another pile of sand. The idea is first you have to simplify. You have to turn the sand into something that you can actually manage to work with. And of course, this also ends up into where we end up with glassworking, is essentially that same basis, is that you first have to change your materials and simplify them into something that's more pliable, more realistic to work with, that will actually hold its shape when left to its own chaos. Whereas I think people tend to just take the intermediate stages and then judge the whole of the medium through that. So, Charles, if you were coaching someone who is getting started into Smash, how would you set them to start defining their game plans within the lens of mental stack?
Well, when I think of applying mental stack to your gameplay, the first things I think about are the situations that your opponent has less options in. So, when I think about neutral, I completely agree with Ramses in terms of just like trying to explain mental stacking in neutral goes like so deep. And realistically, the whole, when I explain refresh rate and the first time I thought about it, it's like, at what points are you reacting? A top player is reacting, I would say, maybe every 20-ish frames or something like that. If they're super on point, maybe every 30 frames. But it's like when Spargo does a dash forward, then dashes back, I feel like, I don't know this for sure, but I'm assuming, because I think Spargo has the best refresh rate in Smash Brothers or Ultimate, he's dashing forward, and as he's dashing forward, he's reacting to what his opponent is doing, and then he flicks the stick. I mean, he might not think like, okay, now I dash back. Like, he's not monologuing in his head, but then he might, depending on the position after the dash, he could jump, he could do another dash, right? He could down tilt, he could rip his up smash, anti-airs, right? He could dash back. But I think Spargo is reacting in terms of like how often. I think Spargo reacts the most in Smash. Be like the point of reactions, right? And even when I'm coaching players that are newer, one thing that I talk about a lot is commitment rate. I'm like, your commitment rate's too high. Like, there's a dash attack, there's a dash grab, there's a smash attack. These are things that you do when you're saying, you know what, fuck it, I don't want to react. Like, that's the choice you make. You're like, okay, you're giving up on reacting because reacting takes a lot of mental energy. When someone sits there at the ledge and shield, and someone just hangs there on the ledge and they hang for like 2-3 seconds, the other person in shield is like burning a lot of energy because their mental stack is going off, right? They're like, okay, what is he gonna do? And then they're so focused, right? They're probably, there's no thoughts even in their head. They're just solely focused, and they're looking at the opponent's character model. And in that time frame of being focused and they're not doing anything, it's taking a lot of energy, which is why hanging on the ledge is really good, because you're kind of like testing how long your opponent can react until they just say like, okay, fuck it, I'm out of here, right? And they just like dip out or whatever. So that is the first thing I want to push in terms of just you want to increase the amount of times you react. So, and obviously this mixes in with game plans and stuff like that, but I feel like people have patterns, right? Where like, okay, I'll do this like one pattern, boom, and then I react. So it's like, I will full hop, fast fall, short hop, react. Like, what did I do? You know what I mean? Like, people have patterns, and then it's like they'll stick reactions after the patterns, whereas Spargo will like full hop up, react, fast fall down, react, short hop, react, right? So he reacted 3 times there, whereas lesser players, they have patterns, and then they react at certain times of the patterns. If you want to increase your refresh rate or your mental stack, you want to be able to react more. And obviously you have to take baby steps. You can't just be like, all right, cool, I'm going to be Spargo and react at every turn or whatever, which is why I suggest when you're trying to increase your mental stack, do it in simpler places, like the ledge, like juggling, right? These are edge guarding a lot harder, but ledge, I would say, is the easiest place where you can at least start like sticking the training wheels on your mental stack. And where I would start is, this is the most common thing I tell players to work on: shield by normal getup. If they normal getup, you grab. You have 1 mental stack, only 1. Start with 1, right? If they roll, shit, that sucks. But like, but then you start adding it, right? So once you start, once you're able to react to normal getup and grab it, then you're like, okay, now I'm going to try to add 2. If they roll, I short hop bear out of shield, or I like B reverse up B, or it depends on your character, right? Say you're Cloud, and they're tall enough, right? And it's like Ramses was saying, it's so hard to work on mental stacking specifically, because it's like, okay, what's the mental stack? But wait, it's this matchup. Oh crap, this guy's too short to like back air out of shield. This guy's too short, and the ledge roll is so long that my B reverse up B out of shield doesn't hit him. Now what do I do, right? So then you got to start working on like dropping shield when you think they're going to do it. Then you can add more stuff, right? So it all comes down to, again, trying to complete one thing, and you start with a mental stack of 1. That's your, and then and you try to do the most common thing, right? Normal get up from ledge, very common option, right? And if you can't grab normal get up on reaction, your opponent will abuse that. They'll normal get up in the shield, and they'll take a hit or whatever on their shield, and they'll try to wiggle out or whatnot, right? So that's where I always recommend people to at least start working on the mental stack, the idea of mental stacking. But depends on your character, but every character can be in shield and grab normal getup. Every character can do it. Obviously, if you have a tether grab, it's a bit harder. You got to react a little bit earlier and stuff like that. So there's even context to that. But most characters in the game can start there. And then from there, you work on it, because reacting to a get-up attack should be easy enough. If you can't react to like someone hitting your shield with like get-up attack and then punishing it, well, shit.
Practice
That's
more.
That's bad.
You're not there yet. That means you're not there yet.
Don't worry about mental stacking.
Yeah, you have more problems right now.
There's other problems you got.
That's what I mean, right? Like mental stack is such a like late development like issue. Like it only becomes the core issue when you're so far along all of these other trajectories.
But I will say when it comes to ledge trapping / juggling specifically, those
and
are
tech chasing.
Those
Set
are
place.
right. Those are all things that
I agree.
You should, no matter the level, you should at least understand what you're trying to accomplish, and you should at least you should be able to do a mental stack of like 3 or 4, and if you can do that on your advantage state, even if your neutral's kind of ass, like you can probably get on your local PR, just because when you do put someone on the ledge, if you have a mental stack of 3 or 4, you can kind of like hit someone really hard, right? Like you put them on the ledge, you deal a bunch of damage, you can take stocks, right? Now would I say if you have a sword character standing by roll and spamming aerials and not letting them reversal you on a ledge jump on stage control, is that easier to do? And will you get about the same reward? Yeah, I would say that. But to get into that higher level while you're standing by roll, if you can't react to normal get up and forward tilt them with cloud, that's a huge way Spargo ends a lot of stocks, because they're so scared to ledge jump, and he's standing by roll, they don't want to roll. And if he's standing by roll, so ledge drop, double jump options aren't going to reach him, depending on your character, unless you're like someone like Pyro or something. But most characters can't threaten that area from the ledge. So then even if they ledge drop, double jump aerial, they're whiff, and then he'll forward tilt, right? So it's a really scary position, but it only becomes scary if you can have at least a base mental stack of 1, where it's like, if you do normal get up, I hit this. Actually, well, you have to have multiple, right? Because you also have to be able to cover the roll and kill them too. So the positions that top player put themselves in advantage state only are a threat because they can sit there and react. And then it gets crazier when they guess the timing of your reaction, because if they know what time you're going to pick your ledge option, their mental stack increases, because that's when like dropping the shield OS comes in, right? Okay, I will drop shield, so I will parry get up attack, but I also have enough frame advantage because I'm not sitting in shield to dash back up smash your ledge roll and stuff like that. So I think just starting off with 1, and even in tech chase scenarios, like, okay, if you're light and you're playing Fox and you're on point, he'll hit a nair and he does the jab OS where he like lands, dash up, hits 1 jab. If you miss tech, jab block, up smash. This is why OSs are so nice, that jab gives you a visual point of reaction. All right, boom, jab. My character is now lagging, right? I can't act. But now, since he's lagging from the jab, this is the time I react visually. Okay. Right. And then if you're good enough, okay, boom, I see the ledge roll in. And if you're good enough or have smash stick, things that make it easier, you can get an up smash punish. But if you aren't and you're lagging behind about 4 frames, because dash attack is frame 4 and up smash is frame 8, if you're a little bit slower, then get the dash attack, right? You're still hitting them. You're still putting them in disadvantage, so you can go from there, right? So understanding things like that, where at first you're going to go, okay, I'm going to throw out the jab, and then maybe that's the only thing you cover is the no tech or tech in place, because they're not moving, up smash, right? They stayed in the same spot and you got the hit, or they're invincible from the jab and then you up smash. And then if you want to practice covering roll in, you can also start with pre-position react. So it's like, okay, I'm going to nair. I think they're going to roll in. I'll like dash forward, dash back. If they roll in, I up smash. So instead of going for like these crazy hard reads, you can anticipate options, put yourself in a position to react, then hit the up smash. And then when you start getting that consistently, that's when you start like, okay, now I'm going to start to try the OS and try to like react to the roll in, right? It's all baby steps. And it's hard to get to that point if you don't know what the baby steps are, but that's why we're here, right? We're trying to tell you guys these examples. And that's why characters like Game & Watch Corrin and Fox, particularly on juggles in tournament, they relieve so much pressure from you in juggle situations because you don't really you're just pressing your buttons and it's automatic. Like if Corrin swings up air at you, like there's no like moves in the game that really beat it. So they have to air dodge, right? Or you force double jump. Or if they don't have double jump, they air dodge, then you then you just trap their landing, right? So then you trap their landing with either an air or, I mean, you're just going to land back down to the ground and have so much frame advantage. You can do whatever you want.
No, exactly. I mean, and that's why even like simple OSs as well, like this, where it's like you can do OS where you do up air, fast fall, dash, right? And it's like two things happen, right? It's either, especially with sorties, where it's like, oh, well, doesn't matter. They're losing to my up air. It's like, oh, if my up air hits, cool. Well, because of that lag, that dash input is not going to hit the buffer window, right? Because you're essentially putting that dash in that whiff buffer window. And so because
when you get a hit, it takes more time. So like also understanding hit lag on hit and hit lag on shield. So this is where you start mixing the knowledge of hit lag with buffer system, with the priority system and all that stuff.
Right. And it's like, so because of that now, it's like, oh, okay. So I have a hit. And so now that dash is gone. So because I got that up air, I can combo that up air now, right? But if that up air whiffs, I dashed, and if I just put that if I was already putting that input based on where they're weaving, then I'm good. Now I get to chase their landing as well, right? And that's such a strong tool, and that's a very simple option select, like very, very simple.
It's a mental stack of two right there. That's it. Yeah. You're looking for two scenarios, right? That's pretty much it.
Yep.
Especially if you're a sword character. Obviously, not everyone has the privilege of being like, your falling aerial can't beat my rising aerial, right? Not all characters are privileged like that, but that's why these characters are stronger, right? And we also talked about like in tournament environments, the more simple you make things, the less likely you will fuck them up if you're nervous, right? Which is why these characters are very, very strong. Even like the spike in Game & Watch. I mean, I guess not even like a spike. It's like we have one more Game & Watch up there, but he's very, very high up there.
That's a doubling.
Yeah, it's 100% increase, and he's top 3.
That is a spike. No, but I think a lot of the regional Game Watch are doing better too. We see him pop up like everywhere. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they found out they can use Nair. It's sick.
Well, I mean, if you have 2 examples showing you how to do it, it becomes a lot easier to emulate.
No, 1,000%.
Maybe she's born with it.
Yeah.
And I mean, this could be what, even tying into what Ramses was talking about, just your game plan, right? If your game plan's simple, if your juggling game plan is rising up air and my mental stack is 2, it's just they get hit by it, or like I will not get hit if I do this, right? So you do it, and then, okay, cool, they'll either get hit or double jump, right? Or they'll air dodge through it. So it's either they're going above you, whether it's getting hit or burning a resource, or they're going below you intangibly, and you have frame advantage, so you punish it. So it's like OSs make the game plan more streamlined, which I think is very, very important.
For sure.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say real quick. And one thing I like to, Charles, like you were saying, in terms of going to the ledge again, right? Where those are moments in the game where the game becomes very distilled. Same thing with tech chasing, right? When it gets distilled. And yes, that's where for you players that are growing, right? Mental stack still applies, right? Because the game is in such a distilled state at the ledge in terms of the options that are available. When you are in a tech chase situation, the options that are available, right? And so it's like that, those are the times where it makes sense to kind of dive into that, right? Versus, like we talked about neutral, where there's just going to be so many additional options. So I think that's always a big one. I know we talked about option selects already and how that can reduce things down as well too. And sometimes it's just like even just understanding just general timings of people, right? One big one, I cannot find the article right now. I'm pretty sure it was Justin who wrote it. It was like one of his columns and stuff like that a while back. I don't think it was the ones on Event Hub, but he talked about how even kind of a basic thing is about, like, for example, again, I'm going to use forgive me, I'm going to use another Street Fighter reference, but Honda, right? I'm pretty sure everyone knows about Honda's flying headbutt, right? Shout out to Tong, by the way.
Mhm.
Always but flying headbutt is traditionally has been a solid tool of that character, right? Obviously flying through the air with a headbutt, and it can be very fast, right? So for a lot of times, like Justice Wong was talking about, like when you're playing the game, like, okay, in the very beginning, round start, right? You got to be prepared for a headbutt right off the bat. Then you have usually people go for that, or they go for a slight delay, then headbutt. But past that time period, headbutt probably shouldn't be in your mental stack, because more often than not, past that slight delay, they're not doing headbutt. They're doing something else at that point, right? People tend to use those kind of timings, and obviously there's more complexity in that as well, but that's just like a really like small version. But like the idea is that there's certain windows and gaps that we tend to like take, right? Where we tend to like try to go for an opportunity, and understanding that in your opponent, and understanding also in general where people tend to make those decisions, is very, very key, because that also is something that can really help you have more discernment. And also having more discernment allows you to reduce your mental stack, right? Because again, majority of the time, it's about that prioritization of those things, right? Certain things are going to be like, this can be done, is also as strong as the other option. And so now it's just I gotta guess, and based off previous information, well, et cetera, right? But a lot of times, right, you'll have certain things, and it's like, oh wait, if this hits me, dude, I'm screwed. Oh, but if I get grabbed here, that doesn't really matter, right? That's something, those things should alleviate your mental stack, right? I should not be freaking out about Ness back throw at like 5% in the center of the stage. All right. If I'm at a high percent now, damn, I can't let him grab me. That's for sure, right? Like that, it's a different, it's just a different understanding, right? And I think that's something that is very, very important when you're trying to reduce your mental stack, understanding those things, right? And also when you're trying to find it for your opponent, is again being able to have that discernment of what are they valuing, right? If you can understand what your opponent is valuing in certain things, a lot of that information, that core information, like those kind of biases, you can use that to break down what things they're probably going to be looking at, how you can, like, that can give you a clue as to up their mental stack, what things they'll tend to lean into because of what they value, right? And vice versa. Like all these little things like are incredibly nuanced. But again, if you know what to look for, and you're like focused on these avenues, and then also you have a general understanding of what is actually important and what is not, that stuff can really take you far, right? But yeah, again, Charles, I really like you talking about the ledge and tech chasing and platform and stuff as well, because that stuff those are situations that are distilled enough that where if you're at mid-level from a high level, at that point you should have some base understanding of that enough to recognize the rock paper scissors there, right? Like you can see the rock paper scissors, right? Some other things in neutral roles, things like that, you don't even know what rock is, you don't even know what paper is. So it like learn how to hold your hand first so you can make a rock, right? and then you can have that discussion. But for those things, they're distilled enough where you can really have that discussion. Last thing I wanted to say there too is I think it's really fascinating as well, because what tends to happen for mid-level play, right? We've all seen the meme, right? Where it's like you have someone's very beginning and it's like they're dumb, and then it goes, and then it's like, then you have the mid-level, and then like, they're the dumb, quote unquote dumb, or the new person is choosing this option because like they're just doing it, right? And then it's like you have the Jedi, right? The classic, you have the Jedi at the end, and they're doing the same thing that person was doing, but like, oh yeah, it just worked. But there's like a understanding of those things, right? And I think part of that a lot of times is because mid-level players, like, they are inaccurate in their understanding of things like mental stack or what things should be important, right? And so a lot of times they're trying to figure that stuff out hella early. And because of that, that's why you start losing to freaking like, spamming Steven, right? Who's just all out here just freaking just swinging at you like crazy. And you're like, this guy's so stupid. He's so dumb. Why am I losing to him? He should know that is terrible. Why is he doing that? It's like, dude, if you can't accurately break that down and this person's not looking at this stuff and you're trying to sense this mental stack here and he's doing this and he should know all these options here. He don't know that. Like, he's not playing that game. He don't care. He's trying to press buttons on you and he's going to keep pressing buttons on you because you're over here like sitting down, trying to have this complex discussion because you think now that you understand your game to a little extent, you get all excited. You think you're just this technical scientific genius. You're trying to go through this stuff. You don't know the formulas yet, bro. And so until you know that, until you can accurately beat all those things, they're going to be able to do all those things to you, right? And that's part of it. I think that's a reason why a lot of mid-level players get into that weird spot where it's like, well, they essentially, because they're learning so much of the game, they just naturally pollute themselves, right? With all these thoughts that are completely irrelevant at that point in time. So I think that's something that's really, really fascinating on Mental Stack, on how, like, again, when we're talking about, this is something, it's a higher level, like, it is like, we're talking about a higher level discussion here, right? And it's something that we're not saying it's reserved for higher level because we're trying to disrespect anybody or make someone feel like, oh, you're not there yet, you're dumb. Like, no, a lot of times when you're trying to think of these things at the wrong time, it will be a deficit. You will be like taking up all your mental dexterity, focused on things. You're mentally guard breaking yourself because you're thinking about things that don't matter. They don't matter right now. You're not there yet, right? There's a time and place for everything. So I think that if you guys take anything from this, right, like, understand what we're talking about so you know when you get there. Also understand how it applies to things where the game is distilled, where you do have an understanding, right? Again, ledge, tech chase, all those things. But also know that these things can be a detriment if you're not going about it the right way. It brings down a lot of players and they get frustrated and they get upset because, like, man, they should know when I have this card, I have a trap card. Why are they swinging? Like, that don't matter yet, bro. You're not there yet, right? You're not there. So yeah, that was one thing I want to say.
I think building off of that, I actually want to talk about something else that you said, but I think it's an interesting topic here where I have something to say too. I think something that people tend to do is they project their own understanding on the opponents.
Yes.
And that is in essence what you're talking about. It's like, I understand all of these complex new ideas. Well, complex and new is in the eye of the beholder, but you get what I mean.
Right.
And so they start to view everything through that lens. And so, like Bam said, they add things to the mental stack that don't necessarily exist because it's so new to you. And so for any skill, you always go through like 4 stages, right? So the 4th stage, this is called the 4 stages of mastery. You can look it up. It's a very interesting idea, something that I use, I think, in 80-90% of my coaching sessions. And so the 4 stages of mastery are unconscious incompetence. So you don't know about it, you suck at it. Then there's conscious incompetence. So now you realize that you suck at something. Then there's conscious competence. You now are good at something, but it requires a lot of conscious effort. And then finally, there's unconscious competence, which means that you are good at something without needing to spend any mental energy to be good at it. And so if you learn something new, what happens is that you're often very consciously competent at it at that point. And so it takes a lot of energy to just be able to keep up with it. And so because you're spending so much energy on it, you can kind of see it everywhere. It's kind of like the Tetris effect. If you guys don't know what the Tetris effect is, it basically means like when someone plays a lot of Tetris, when they see like a desk, they'll look at a desk as like a Tetris block and they'll be like, wait, how would other Tetris block fit into the desk? And so that's like a natural like thing that our mind does, is when there's something interesting to you or something that you've been working on a lot or thinking about a lot, you start seeing it when it's not even there. And that's kind of what you're seeing there when you're projecting your own understanding on the opponent as well.
Yep.
What I actually wanted to get back on that I think is super interesting is that Bam talked about understanding what your opponent values. And so that, if you think about it, is a bit of a read in the sense that you don't know what someone values, right? Like you cannot look at someone and be like, oh, you value I don't know, like getting grab reads or whatever.
Mhm.
And so that is, again, it's a bit of projecting yourself. You're like, I think this is what you value. And so I mentioned this in my first kind of like my discussion, my monologue, is that there are multiple ways to manage your mental stack. And so sometimes, like that example I gave is sometimes you'll be in CQC, and sometimes you'll focus more on like attacks, and sometimes you'll focus more on grabs, and sometimes you'll focus more on like rolls. And that's like a very simple way of thinking about
What
it.
you like to do
But-
in scrambles. Which
exactly.
is a
Yeah.
very
so,
common neutral scenario.
Yeah, I would even say that scrambles are getting more popular at neutral solutions as we see more Kazuya's in game watches, especially game watches. Steve's as well. Like these characters are generally very good at scrambles. Anyway, like that is one way of looking at it. Is like saying, okay, I'm gonna think about the options itself. But if we're thinking about managing the mental stack, that's where, for example, you can say, okay, I think this guy values these type of options, so I'm gonna focus more on countering these options. And because I'm spending extra energy on focusing on this one thing, I will have less focus for these other elements. And so let's say your mental stack can normally take up random number, like 5 different things. So if you're like blind reacting, you can discern between 5 different things within a decent amount of time, which is absolutely ludicrous, by the way. But let's just assume that is a number. If I know that my opponent really likes jumping, I can say I'm going to focus extra hard on countering a jump, which means I can only discern whether it's a jump or whether it's not a jump. So instead of 5, we can only discern 2 things. But when I'm right about that discerning, I get more reward, right? And so that's another way of playing your mental stack, where we're focusing on a much narrower set of options with higher reward. And so the way you manage your mental stack is also a choice, is also an RPS. But again, this is something that we don't see until like really, really high levels. But I think it builds so nicely up on what Bam was talking about, where it's such an important thing to understand what your opponent values, because when you do get into mental stack and you do get that understanding of like, okay, they like these type of options, you can play with that. You can play with that and say like, okay, I'm going to narrow my mental stack to get higher reward. Or you can say, I'm at the beginning of a game, let's make my mental stack as broad as possible so that I'm ready for more different options, but I have less reward in return. And so on top of that, there are certain characters that favor different styles. So think about something like Tweak. And like I've never talked to Tweak, by the way, so I'm using it based on my observations. But whenever I look at Tweak, something that I think is so impressive is that he will always keep as broad of a mental stack as possible until he really locks into specific habits. And so what that does is whenever you see Tweak start a set, he almost never like starts a set on like the back foot. He will always spend time like jockeying for a position, being ready for all these possible bad outcomes. Better than almost any other player. There are players that come close or might even surpass him depending on your point of view. But I really love Tweak for this because he's been doing this for such a long while. And I think that's such a strong skill to have, because what he does is at the start, again, very broad mental stack, and then as he gets a better understanding of the opponent, it gets narrower and narrower. And I think being able to do that is just such an important skill
And
at that
very
level.
hard to
And I
do.
think
Like
very,
So hard to do.
very
in
fucking hard
Ultimate
to do.
specifically too, like
Yes.
Mhm.
I think only the hardest grinders in this game can do it. And this game is already like what now, over 5 years old, right?
Yeah.
And even then, I don't think there are more than 10 people in the world who can do this well. There are people who do it, but doing it well is just such a specialized skill.
It's hard, man. It's hard.
Yeah, it's really, really freaking hard, because like we've been saying up until now, it's still worth repeating. You gotta master the tools before you can make the proper decisions with the tools. If you don't know what the hammer does, you cannot know when the hammer's best, right? And so because Ultimate has so many tools, in other words, so many situations you can enter, if you have 1,000 tools, well, tell me when the hammer that weighs 0.01 pounds more is better or worse than the other hammer, right? Like there will be situations where that little bit of extra weight is better, but like you tell me when that is. And so to really get into the nitty gritty of these mental stack optimizations, you have to know your tools at that level of intimacy almost.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so huge kudos to our top level players, honestly. And of course, shout out to Sonics as well, who I think is another player in our game who on a defensive level, similar to Tweak, is very, very good at being ready for possible bad outcomes, and very good at kind of like narrowing and broadening the mental stack whenever necessary. Very, very cool.
And on that note, I would actually go so far as to say that there is an RPS to mental stack in terms of it can have different textures, which the idea here is that we've identified how you can perceive things in terms of sensory, but there's different ways to sense the game. So there are obviously tactile versions through things like controller rumble. There is usually visual is the most universal reaction point, but there's also things like audio cues.
Audio is big for me, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Same. Yep.
And so the idea here is that if you go into what Charles was referring to about developing, like, for example, your ledge trap process, which I believe we went into in other detail with the ledge trapping video.
Right.
And the idea there is that you have simplified the game into what is closer to a traditional FGC set play, which is, of course, something Bam has talked about before, and I think we've referred to prior as choke points, or I have at least.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea here is once you have narrowed down the game to something that you can understand simply, if you understand how you are responding to it, and then you also have enough perspective or experience to experience how other players experience it, then what you can do is you can then have multiple perspectives or POVs that you have to then understand and empathize with your opponent to then understand what form of their mental stack they are taking. So it's not just a matter of recognizing they have a mental stack, but what form it takes. So to go back to Charles's example of Spargo is, I would also agree, the fastest, if not light. So one of those two at reacting to things, except in both cases, I would say that the players are not just a pure reactor. They are specifically operating on a mixture of responses and setting up very small micro situations where it's just green light, red light reactions. But they also set up those situations through rhythm. Like, for example, when Spargo will go for like a dash reverse up smash with Cloud, he's covering multiple things at the same time. He's charging and going to let go of that charge on reaction to something. But as for when he decides to start that dash up smash, there is a rhythm to it, because fundamentally, whenever you are buffering in-game as well, you are naturally buffering your mental stack in order to do that. So once your play is reaching the limit of the actual mechanics of the game, like how fast Spargo plays, you have to queue up or stack your decisions in advance. Otherwise, your gameplay will lack because you're going to have to wait for your refresh rate to catch you up. And so the idea is, in order to play faster than your own refresh rate, you must play in advance and make multiple decisions and chunk them together, which I believe we've also discussed prior in terms of how to improve your decision making. So the way this works then is not every single player that you're going to run into. In fact, most players you run into aren't simply going to chunk their decisions. So how can you decide when should I assume that my opponent is going to mash two things back to back, which is typically what we refer to as mashing, is when your opponent is queuing multiple actions. And so once you understand that that's the dynamic you're going for, then you can read that rhythm. You can appropriately exploit your opponent's mental stack, because once they start getting going, it's kind of like a Pac-Man dash attack. Once you know the first hit is out, you know that the next couple hits are coming as well. And so you can actually position yourself to punish the end of the dash attack instead of just the beginning. Not because you have to, but because you know that it's coming. So you can do something like pivot grab it. And so because this dynamic exists, and because there's so many different ways to view the game, you are generally punished, as Bam mentioned before, for making assumptions before you have means to actually verify these assumptions, before you have the experience to have experienced this either by having tried playing the game in that way and approaching the game with a different lens yourself, or by actually just having so much raw life experience playing the game. I know Bam referenced Justin Wong being someone who is playing since probably before I was an adult. And so the idea there is you don't have to think that deeply about it if you live and breathe something for so many decades that it's just a matter of waking up and knowing that the car is probably going to put their foot on the gas at the green light.
Yeah.
It's not that deep.
The unconscious competence, right? The
Yes, sir.
second nature,
Exactly.
right? Second
Mhm.
nature.
And so if you are going into that and trying to actually make commitments and actually on the board based on assumptions without those experiences, without those perspectives, you're actually going to be hurting yourself. And so if you don't have this experience, you're better off just going ahead and focusing on yourself. Just develop yourself, push forward so that the things you're going to be doing are more powerful or effective in a vacuum. And then think about how you can use those superior tools in the future once you've acquired more experience, just using your tools while you're developing them. I'm not asking you to wait until you have mastered the Kazuya Touch of Death combos before you start going to your locals. But while you are doing so, try and pay attention. How do people respond? What do people do when they drop out? How can I take advantage of this? These are examples of how you can learn and slowly and practically acquire the ability to manipulate your opponent's mental stack while you are learning your own character without having to try and overplay the game there. Try and get fancy where something simple would be just as or more effective. And so in addition to this texture, something else you can do is you can try and focus on how you can defend against your opponent trying to manipulate your own mental stack. And again, if you're trying to get into the weeds with it and try and think, well, and for the record, this is what the third layer of mental stacking would essentially come down to is instead of trying to think, oh, well, my opponent knows that I think in this kind of sentence, therefore they're going to try and give me a paragraph at a time. Don't get too deep into it. Just focus on, I know I get overwhelmed in these situations. When these bright lights happen, I get really confused and angry. These are very simple things that you can pay attention to in hindsight and then recognize for the future. Because if you know your opponent, your next opponent is fond of using bright lights, guess what? So you can predict future impediments based on recognizing past ones. So pay attention to the past so that you can predict your own future. And that is how we can go ahead and develop the third layer of the mental stack, but even though it doesn't come up yet. And so, like, theoretically, that is the way I will approach that, I will say.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And again, I know I was talking about it a bit earlier. Like, this is literally even how we are learning to train, and like do machine learning and deep learning. Like, it's literally through that, and that's how they're approaching because they understand now. Like, that's how the human mind like accounts for things, right? And it's about taking in all that data, but also being able to reference that data. Like, you need a lot of ton of experience, but you also need to be someone who's willing to look back at the past, right, and recognize those things so you can utilize that to move how you move in the future, right? So yeah, I think that was a great point there, Tony.
Yep. And on that note, that will conclude the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed our discussion, our explanation, and breakdown of the mental stack. It's a really deep topic, but yeah, I hope you guys learned something. Of course, if you guys do enjoy the content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you guys want to support us directly, you can go ahead and subscribe to the Discord to ask us questions. And until next time, class dismissed.